Very welcome to our webinar today on our Irish Centre for Human Rights LLM programmes. Today I am joined by some colleagues from our Irish Centre for Human Rights. I'm joined by Professor Shane Darcy, Dr. Anna Arstein Kerslake, and also Professor Ray Murphy. And I'm also delighted to be joined by two of our current students, Ashley and Simon. The format of today's webinar is a short presentation, and afterwards our students will tell you a little bit about their student experience, and then at the very end we'll answer your questions. So feel free to start typing your questions in now, and we'll get to them at the very end. So I would now like to hand you over to Dr. Shane Darcy.
Thanks, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join this webinar to talk about the LLM programs at the Irish Centre for Human Rights. So my name is Shane Darcy. I'm the Deputy Director of the Irish Centre for Human Rights. And unlike my colleagues who are also joining me, I'm also a graduate of the Irish Centre for Human Rights. So I studied here many years ago. So I'm going to be particularly biased in recommending the Irish Centre for Human Rights. I've worked here for about 15 years. The centre in its current format has been going for around almost 25 years or so. We're coming up to our 25th anniversary in terms of the LLM programs at the Irish Centre for Human Rights. The LLM programs were the first programs that we established, in particular the LLM in human rights law. But over the years, then we've added additional LLM programs, which you'll hear about from myself on international criminal law, my colleague Ray Murphy on peace operations, humanitarian law and conflict, and my colleague Anna Arstein Kerslake, who speak about migration and refugee law studies, as well as our general human rights law, LLM. But the centre is not just about those LLM programs. We're also quite a research-based institution. Many of the colleagues here are involved in policy work as well, seeking to implement policy or legislative change, both Ireland or in other jurisdictions, or indeed internationally. But it's not just colleagues, it's not just staff. The students as well across our range of programs do get active in the various work and research that goes on at the centre. We have a strong and vibrant PhD program. We have around 25 or so at any given time PhD students studying in the fields of human rights law, international law, criminal law, etc. And we also have two undergraduate programs. And in fact, there may be some of you from either our BA in human rights or BCL in human rights program joining us today. So just to talk a little bit about the centre, you'll see we have some slides up there giving information about the centre. There is a strong clinical focus in our human rights LLM programs, where we try to impart students with specialised skills in addition to the more theoretical and abstract learnings that you'll do during the course. But it's a very topical and up-to-date set of programs, because we're looking at events as they unfold globally, whether it's migration, refugee issues, international criminal law. Some of you have been seeing headlines in the past few weeks, even the past couple of days, about arrest warrants before the International Criminal Court. So highly topical, highly relevant, and we try to give our students both the knowledge and the understanding of the legal frameworks, of the concepts that you may apply, as well as then skills that you'll be able to use if you do and go on and work in the field of international human rights law or the related fields. In terms of our student body then, it's a very, very diverse and international student body. Across our LLM programs in any one year, we'll have around 50 or so students in total. The LLM in human rights law is perhaps the largest, with around 30 or so. And then in the other programs, there's anywhere between 8 and 12 students taking those particular modules. But it's a very diverse and a very international student body. So this year, we have 21 countries represented amongst the students that are studying at the School of Law here in the University of Galway. And in our LLM programs, there's quite a diversity across the globe in terms of students that are participating. So you see there in the slide some of the countries represented: Afghanistan, Australia, Brazil, India, Ireland, Kenya, New Zealand, Nigeria, Palestine, etc. So quite a few from Europe, North America and South America, quite a few African students in particular. The Irish Aid Fellowship Scheme that's run by the Department of Foreign Affairs has been a way that we can support students from African countries and from a select number of other countries that the Department of Foreign Affairs has selected, Palestine amongst them, but also Vietnam recently, and scholarships are available to those students. Now, those scholarships aren't run by us here at the Irish Centre for Human Rights, but it's rather through the Irish Aid Fellowship Scheme, and you can find information about that online. But they do contribute to the diverse and eclectic mix of students. And certainly when I was studying here, you learn as much from your fellow students, from your peers, I find in some ways, as from the staff and the colleagues at the Irish Centre for Human Rights. And it's a real strength of the programme, because many of the students, of course, are coming from conflict or post-conflict zones and have real life experience of some of the human rights or humanitarian law issues that we're addressing in the programme. So why study at the Irish Centre for Human Rights? So you'd have, as part of your LLM programme, you would have your regular courses, your regular classes, which we'll come to later on, but also there's a lot of additional activities taking place at the centre. It's a very dynamic and a very active institution. So just there on the list you can see seminars, summer schools, conferences. So throughout the regular term, we would often have invited speakers, human rights practitioners, experts, fellow academics who come and give a lunchtime seminar, often on a topic of their interest or a current research project. And these are public events that are open to all our students. As well, then we sometimes have evening events. We have our annual lecture. This year we had Dr. Francesca Albanese, who's the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation in Palestine concerning human rights, and Maha Abdallah, who's a graduate of our program who works for various NGOs, and they delivered the annual lecture on the situation of human rights in Palestine, particularly focusing on Gaza. We also have a summer school on the International Criminal Court, as well as conferences on various topics throughout the year. So in addition to your regular classes, you'd also have opportunities to attend these seminars or summer schools or conferences to build up your knowledge and to learn more about different aspects of human rights law. We also provide career support, whether it's through colleagues here at the centre providing advice or guidance to students, as well as the Career Development Office within the university more broadly. Expert lecturers, that's us. We are experts in our fields, not to be to brag about it, but many of the colleagues, and I'll pick out one here who I see on my screen, which is Professor Ray Murphy. So Ray Murphy has served in the Irish Defence Forces for many years. He's a qualified barrister and he's an expert in the field of international humanitarian law. He's regularly speaking to the media, publishing, lecturing, delivering trainings globally in his areas of expertise. We also then have guest speakers. So people who may come in specifically to deliver a class or deliver a course who come from the world of practice. So yesterday we were in the Hague with a group of students and we met with Judge Gwenaël Matteau, who's a judge at the Kosovo Specialist Tribunal. And he's one of our adjunct professors, and he has from time to time come to the centre and delivered guest lectures. So they're just a couple of examples of where we have expertise internally as well as externally coming to the centre. Field trips, we annually have a few field trips. We go to the military barracks here in Galway. We also go to The Hague, where we visit the international courts, the ICC, the ICJ, two institutions that have been very prominent in the news lately. And that's a terrific opportunity to see those courts up close, to meet with some of the staff, to meet with some graduates who are working at these institutions, and to see how the law that we've learned about is actually applied and implemented in practice. And then two other things to mention. There is quite a clinical focus in aspects of the studies that you can do here at the Irish Centre for Human Rights. We have two aspects of that. The first is an organisation called the Global Legal Action Network, who are an NGO who are involved in litigation and various other legal actions relating to human rights, relating to humanitarian law, relating to international criminal law. And they have a presence here at the centre, but each year they take on students as part of a placement scheme that they that they operate, which gives students first-hand experience in working with an NGO in terms of building up the sort of skills and expertise that you need in that particular area. We also have a clinic, a human rights law clinic module that students can take as well, which does something quite similar, but with a more diverse range of organizations. And then sometimes we have ad hoc arrangements. Maybe an individual staff member has a project. Maybe we've been contacted by a UN expert who needs some students to provide research assistance. So for the past couple of years, we've had teams of students working with the UN Special Rapporteur Albanese, working on the situation of human rights in Palestine. So there is great opportunities to be able to not just learn about different human rights practices or policies or legislation, but also then to actually work with organizations on trying to implement those. In terms of, this slide talks about leading future change in human rights, and it's effectively talk about the sorts of activities that are done as part of the Human Rights Law Clinic. And it gives an indicative list there of the projects that students have worked on in the past. So for example, talking about statutory time limits for decisions on international protection applications. So of particular interest to those students studying asylum seeking law, refugee law and policy, migration, etc. A report on the human rights implications of period poverty. So gender and human rights is a strong subject here at the centre, and some of the clinical work has involved looking at particular issues in that area. A legislative ban on importing fracked gas. So increasingly we see environmental issues being addressed through the clinic, and of course we also have a module called Climate Justice that brings out the human rights dimension of environmental issues. And then finally, just another example there, a report that was prepared for the Minister of Children, analysing the impact on children's rights of the reception system for asylum seekers, which is known as direct provision. So that's quite an Irish context, but with an international dimension, and students at the centre, as part of their clinical work, were able to make a recommendation to the Irish Minister on this particular topic. And then finally, just in terms of this sort of clinical work, I'll talk about a little bit about GLAN, with the Global Legal Action Network, who I mentioned already. So it's a non-profit organisation that does various legal actions, both domestically but also globally. And through this placement scheme, students have an opportunity to work with them. And I think Ashley, who's one of our students who's joined us, has done some of that recently, so she may get to mention it later on in the webinar. So again, we see some of the types of projects that GLAN have been involved in. So a big case submission to the European Court of Human Rights concerning climate change, and there was a decision handed down in that case just recently. Monitoring airstrikes in Yemen, forced labour in Europe. I know they have a project as well dealing with imported cotton, and whether this goes against European rules on forced labour, cotton that's imported from China, which has been made by Uyghur forced labour. Indigenous peoples' rights in the Western Sahara, rights of migrant workers at sea. A couple to add that I've seen them doing recently is a judicial review of arms sales or arms transfers from the UK to Israel in the context of the assault on Gaza. So very topical, very up-to-date research projects with GLAN, and it's a terrific opportunity for those students that are selected to do that. So just to move along, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about the different programs. So as I mentioned, we have 4 LLMs at the Irish Centre for Human Rights. And in case you don't know what I look like, there's also a photo of me on the current slide. So I'm the program director for the LLM in International Criminal Law. So this LLM provides students with a foundation, knowledge, understanding of the various institutions of international criminal law. And international criminal law is that body of international law that is addressed to accountability for the most serious violations of human rights, as it's termed. So how do we provide accountability for war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and aggression? Those are our 4 categories of crimes. And in this program, you will learn about the laws, the procedures, as well as the institutions that have been established for this purpose. So going back to Nuremberg and Tokyo after the Second World War, but then right up to the present, to the International Criminal Court and some of the various other ad hoc or hybrid tribunals that we've seen established for Cambodia, Rwanda, and various other countries. So international criminal justice is really a growing field, and you learn about not just the law, but a little bit about the politics that go with these various international institutions. You would take a compulsory international criminal law module, and then there'd be other optional modules that we'd recommend, like international humanitarian law, the laws of war, the criminal procedure, so procedure before these international tribunals. Others, including transitional justice, would be highly recommended. And then during the summer, you prepare a dissertation. As you see on the slide there, there's an optional field trip to The Hague, which is just what we did in the past couple of days, where we go and spend a couple of days visiting the various institutions, various international courts, and seeing them up close. We actually had the opportunity this week to sit in on 2 trial hearings, one at the ICC and one at the Kosovo Specialist Chambers, which was quite fascinating. We also then have a summer school on the International Criminal Court, where we invite judges, lawyers, prosecutors and defense, victims representatives and academic experts who come for a week. This year we're doing it virtually to speak about the law and practice of the International Criminal Court in particular. And that's something that's highly recommended for our students. It's a 1-year full-time program, but a 2-year part-time program. And I'll be staying around until the end of the presentation and happy to answer any specific questions that people may have on the LLM in international criminal law. You can see there a tribute, if that's the right word, from one of our former students, Alex, who took this a couple of years ago. I'm not going to read out exactly what he said, but in terms of what students who have studied that particular program do, well, there's a variety of ways in which people put into practice an LLM in international criminal law. We have had some students that have gone on to work at the various international tribunals. We met one of them yesterday, this time last year. She was studying in Galway. Now she's currently working for Defence Counsel at the Kosovo Specialist Chambers. Some students come and study already with having some experience in this field. So we had an investigator from the ICC who came and studied it because he didn't have a legal background and he wanted to build up that knowledge. We also sometimes have journalists or lawyers who take this and want to implement it in their existing work, or maybe they want to qualify and practice domestically with a view to eventually maybe working at the international level. So there's a variety of ways in which our graduates take the degree that we've given them. So thanks for your attention. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Anna.
Thanks, Shane. I'm stepping in for some of our other colleagues just to describe to you a bit about the LLM and international migration refugee law and policy. And then after that, a bit about our general LLM in international human rights law. The LLM in international migration and refugee law and policy, which is the slide you can see up here, is run by the program director, Dr. Kira Smith, and she does a brilliant job guiding students through law, policy, social issues related to international migration and refugee law, both domestically here in Ireland and internationally. And that's a great program. It's similar to the one that Shane described in terms of being a specific area of international law. If you'd like to focus on that area of migration, refugee law and policy, this is the LLM to do. And I believe towards the end here, we'll be going through, there'll be a slide with a table specifically looking at what the different modules are for the different LLMs. I could tell you a bit now about the LLM in international human rights, which is just on the next slide. Oh, sorry, and yeah, there's the graduates as well, who I'm not familiar with, but sounds like she had a wonderful experience and has gone on to do amazing things in the field of asylum law. Yeah, so I can tell you a bit now about the International Human Rights LLM, which is our more general LLM. The program director is the director of our center, who is Professor Siobhan Mullally, and I've been the program director of this LLM in the past as well. So this is our sort of core module in that it's the most general in terms of giving you the basics of international human rights law. With all of the LLMs, you have electives you can take. This LLM allows you the space to take the most electives, if I understand it right. So this would be for students who have a general interest in sort of social justice and human rights and would like to explore that interest more and have the freedom to explore different kinds of modules within human rights. So if you're not quite sure which area of human rights that you'd like to explore more, either professionally or academically, this is a great LLM to take. I believe it also has our largest cohort of students. Although the LLM, sort of the way we're presenting them, sound like they're very distinct, but all of our LLM students are, share, at least one module each. So it does become a big cohort of LLM students that are all working together and sharing modules. So they're not as distinct as we're presenting them. The distinction would be the group of modules that you take and would result different titled LLMs at the end. I think we then have perhaps another testimonial from a student on the next slide. Yes, so another wonderful student from the past who loved our program and now has a brilliant, successful career afterwards, which, as Shane mentioned, is in fact common of our students. It is a great program here, and many of our students, as Shane said, have really interesting, dynamic human rights careers before they come to us, and then go on to do that after. And many of them are interested in entering the field of human rights, either from a professional standpoint or from an academic standpoint, and often very frequently go on to have either academic or practicing professional careers in human rights, as this student has from South Africa. I think that's all for me. I think I'm passing over to Ray now to talk about the humanitarian law LLM. Yeah.
So thanks, Anna, and good afternoon or good morning to everybody that's listening. So I'm the director of the program on peace operations, humanitarian law and conflict. Perhaps I'll just let you read the slide yourself in due course and just explain maybe a little bit about the program. It's a one-year program, so the template is very similar for all our programs, but I think the current conflict in Gaza maybe encapsulates the major issues that this program deals with. Obviously, it's a conflict situation. We've witnessed very serious violations of international humanitarian law in Gaza over the last number of months. And right now, you may or may not know this, but behind the scenes, the Americans, the Saudis, all of the regional actors are looking at what is going to be the transitional period. What are we going to do when the conflict ends? And how are we going to ensure that there is some form of Israeli withdrawal from Gaza? And what's being proposed is an international protection or peacekeeping force. But in order to be able to implement that, you need to have all the regional powers on board and in supportive and willing to contribute troops. And of course, it needs to have the support of the UN Security Council. So the program looks at the United Nations, it looks at peacekeeping, it looks in particular at the Security Council as the major organ, the executive organ of the United Nations, and how peacekeeping forces operate in the field, the various mandates, the political, legal, and military challenges that they face. And they often go into the field when a conflict is coming to an end, or maybe the actual fighting has stopped. But international humanitarian law is central to all conflict situations, and so I think Gaza encapsulates many of the thematic issues that we will address in a program such as this. And I'd be happy to take any further questions at a later stage. Just to say then that we have a field trip, of course, to the local military barracks, and all students taking this program, of course, are advised to consider the other options available, such as the trip to The Hague to see how the international courts and institutions work that Shane mentioned. So maybe that's enough about the program for now, and I'll go on to talk about the types of careers that all of the students from all of the programs embark upon when they graduate. And of course, a lot depends on on who you are, your qualifications and your particular interests. But many work with the UN or United Nations affiliated organizations. Many will end up working with non-governmental organizations or other international organizations, both from a human rights and development perspective. Some will decide to embark upon a career, for example, in academia, and may decide to pursue a PhD. For those of you that would be interested in achieving a very high office within the, for example, the United Nations system, one of the basic qualifications for entry level to senior posts is to hold a PhD. Then many others go into diplomatic or government-based work, sometimes here and sometimes in other European or African or Asian states. So there's a whole range of potential opportunities that students can avail of when they graduate. And it's not just to consider any one particular avenue. And one of the mechanisms for entry into this kind of work is to embark upon an internship. And that is something that you will be encouraged to do when you're here, and that you'll get advice in relation to. But unfortunately, one of the mechanisms to obtain work as in permanent career opportunities in international organizations and non-governmental organizations is through an internship program. So now I'll just talk a little bit about the qualifications and the types of subjects that you will have to study if you take any of the master's programs that we offer. And if you look at the top panel there, it lists the various master's programs. I'm just glancing at my own here now. The LLM in International Human Rights, the only mandatory module that you must take if you take the LLM in Human Rights Law is International Human Rights Law itself. And then there's a whole range of other optional modules that you may take depending on what's available during semester 1 or semester 2 and what is your particular interest. In regards to international migration and refugee law, you're just a little bit more constrained in that that's a specialized program. And in order to take that program, you must take the subjects that are listed there: contemporary issues in international migration law, European migration law, international refugee law, and the common European asylum system. And then having taken those subjects, you then can choose from the optional modules that are available for all programs. If you're taking the LLM in in peace operations, humanitarian law and conflict, it's mandatory to take the module on peacekeeping, and it's mandatory to take the module on international humanitarian law. And then it's open to you to decide what your interests are, or what you feel would best assist you in your career ambitions, and then look at the optional modules and see what's available. And lastly, then, just to talk about international criminal law, which Shane has already alluded to, the mandatory foundation course for that is international criminal law. And then there's various other modules that you may choose. Some may be more recommended than others if you're taking that particular LLM program. And then you can see the various options that are there. I'm not going to list them. They do vary a little bit from year to year, depending on the staff that are here. But most of those modules are available each year. And when you arrive, you will be given further information in relation to all modules and all options and advice from all the staff here. So that's just a general guideline. I wouldn't get too concerned about the individual modules at this early stage. Last thing I want to refer to are the entry requirements. If you're in the UK or the Irish system, you'll easily follow what the basic entry requirements are. We require, at a minimum, a second-class honours grade 1 degree or higher, or its equivalent. And there's a little bit of latitude there, especially for people from time to time. We get quite senior people who have worked in the field for many years and have accumulated a vast amount of experience. And in fact, as students contribute greatly to the debates and discussions within the centre, there is a little bit of latitude there in regards to academic results, because if people have accumulated experience in the field, that counts for a great deal, and we value that and we respect it. Coming from different countries, translating that into individual marks, to be honest, it is better to refer to the International Office website for your country-specific guidelines as to whether the marks that you're likely to get in your undergraduate program, or indeed already have obtained in an undergraduate program, if they meet the requirements for admission to our programs. And of course, we are happy to answer specific queries in relation to this when people make application forms. So I think that's all I have to say, Lisa. I'm happy to take questions at a later stage. Thank you to everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ray. I have one final slide, but as I present this, if you have any questions, please begin to pop them in the live chat now. So in terms of how to make an application, applications are still open to begin in September 2024, and you can visit our website universityofgalway.ie/apply. The closing date for applications, there is no closing date. Offers are issued on a continuous basis, so we continue to review offers and applications, and basically there's no closing date until we fill the places on the programme. So as soon as you apply, you will normally hear back within a few working days as to whether or not you have been accepted onto the programme. The EU fees for the programme are currently €8,390, and the non-EU fees are currently €19,140. In terms of what you need to make an application, you need your exam transcripts. If you still haven't graduated yet, you can still apply. And what we can do is we can offer a conditional offer pending you submitting your exam transcripts and having the grade required to do the course. You will need a copy of your English language test if English is not your first language. You will also need a personal statement outlining why you wish to pursue this course, and that's approximately 600 words. And then finally, you'll need a copy of your passport or birth certificate and one written reference. If you have any questions after today's webinar, you'll find emails for our programme directors online, or you can also email us at lawpostgrad@universityofgalway.ie. So I'm just going to close my slides and go back so I can see everyone on screen. But before I move on to your questions, I would like to introduce to you two of our current students. We have Ashley from South Africa, and we also have Simon from Germany. So I might begin maybe with Ashley. If maybe you could tell us maybe a little bit about why you decided to study your LLM in International Human Rights.
So I am from South Africa, as Lisa mentioned, and I decided to study my international human rights law degree at the Irish Centre because of its incredible reputation. And also I decided to go for the international human rights law degree because I knew what the general topic that I was interested in, which is human rights. But I wasn't 100% sure or ready to specialize in something specific, especially when I saw all the topics that were available. I was interested in all of them. So the International Human Rights Law degree gave me that opportunity to choose a variety of topics. You also, if you choose the International Human Rights Law degree, you're also allowed to choose one subject in the General LLM degree, as well as any subject in the Disability Masters. So I, for example, took Disability Clinic, and I learned so much from it, as well as Vismoot from the General LLM. and I have learned an incredible amount during my time at this during my studies. So I would 100% recommend doing it.
Great, thanks, Ashley. And I suppose I know you're currently in The Hague right now, so if you could tell us a little bit about how your field trip experience has been, that would be great.
Absolutely. So I am currently in The Hague, so I do apologize if there's background noise, but it was incredible. It's one thing to see the theory, it's another thing to see it in practice. And I've also taken, for example, procedure before the ICC. And during that module, we had many experienced practitioners from the defense team, from the prosecution team, as well as from the victim participation team. And to hear the different sides of during the trial was absolutely amazing. And then to see it in practice, to get to see a trial at the Kosovo Specialist Chambers as well as the International Criminal Court was incredible to see it in person and to see what the chambers look like, what the courts look like, especially given its importance today.
Great, thanks, Ashley. And finally, I suppose, could you maybe tell us about what it's like to live in Galway for those watching who've never been to Galway before?
Absolutely. So I was quite nervous because I was born and bred in South Africa. I've stayed in the same little town for my whole life. So it was quite nerve-wracking having to move firstly overseas and study. But I can honestly say that Galway is probably the friendliest place on earth. The amount of times that I've gotten lost, and I can ask absolutely anyone for assistance, and they won't just give you directions, they will take you to the place, even if it's a 20-minute walk. And I can attest to what both Shane and Ray has said. I have learned so much from the students that I've studied with, as well as students that I've met outside of the course, coming from such various backgrounds and various experience. I, for example, did a topic that related to Afghanistan and for an essay, and then I spoke to someone who had actual experience working in Afghanistan, and I learned so much from them. So staying in Galway it's a beautiful city. There's a beach, so if you're stressed, you can go detox with some beach sea air. There's so much to do. It's very safe, and the only downside to Galway is the housing crisis. So to any prospective students, as soon as you get in, get accommodation.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. And Simon, if I could go to you next, I suppose if you could tell us a little bit about your background and why you decided to pursue your LLM.
So I have, hello everybody. I have a legal background. I studied law in Germany, went through the first state exam, the second state exam, and I have already practiced a few years as a lawyer in a law firm, always having in mind that this cannot be enough. I knew I wanted to go internationally and get out of this little law bubble in Germany, kind of to have all this different perspective Ashley already mentioned you get when you leave your home country and your home jurisdiction and being confronted with all these different experiences and approaches to law. So I practiced a few years, brushed up my English doing that. And then I decided, I want to do a LLM, which is dealing with things which hitting the headlines constantly, and where you have to deal with problems which don't have an easy solution. And because that is what I always liked about law, having this different perspective, different approaches, and have to find a solution. You cannot kind of stay theoretically. You have to kind of implement things practically in the end to find solutions with law. And that was my main reason to say I want to do a master internationally and want to do a master in international human rights in the end.
That's great. Thanks, Simon. And can you tell us what has been your, I suppose, favorite part or favorite module so far on the LLM program?
That's different because there were so many amazing modules, and I would say that's the best thing way presented, that you have one or two core models, maybe three when you do migration law, but the rest you're free to choose. And I really love this variety I could choose from. For example, I where it's not only in international human rights, but also international humanitarian law and peace operations, which I wasn't expecting in the beginning when I started the master to really join. But Ray gave like a terrific introduction at the beginning in the first week, told us about what he's doing in that course, and I really loved it in the end. I like to have this possibility to combine so many different things from different perspectives. I think that is the best thing, not only one specific course, but you can take so much in from different jurisdictions and backgrounds and courses you can choose from.
That's great. Thanks, Simon.